Today we're going over the Commander Precons that are most worth buying right now.
I'm Mia, and I'm traveling a lot this season.
I'm BZ. I'm excited for Secret Santa. That makes us the Nitpicking Nerds. We are sponsored by Card Kingdom. You have to buy Magic cards. It is a basic necessity of every single Magic player who has ever lived. That's the best place to go. They have everything all in one place. They send it to you in all in one package in not 100,000 business days. It is so reliable and amazing.
They have single, they have sealed, they have a little bit of supplies. They have everything you need. So go tell them that we sent you because that's our face on the page.
What about Moxfield?
Oh, that's later, not now.
Sorry, my bad.
Okay, and also we're sponsored by Dragon Shield, but it is best sleeves in the multiverse.
Good sleeves.
I messed up the order of that. They have so many sleeves, whether that's the orange mats or the red mats or the dual mats or the art mats that you can get and you can put your own artwork on.
How could they save 5%?
If you use the code
Nerds. They can save 5%. Isn't that crazy? We're so good today. Also, we are sponsored by ourselves because we have Patreon stuff that you can check out. If you are so inclined, you get some bonus Nerds content. But we've got Commander Precons. We think these are the most worth buying right now. We went and scanned Card Kingdom for all the prices. That is what we're using. And we think these are all really good deals. Not necessarily all for the same reason, so we're going to run through all 5 of them, and then you can figure out which ones are worth buying for you.
The first one is First Flight. The face commander is Isperia, Supreme Judge. 2 white, blue for a 6/4 with flying. Whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, you can draw a card. The game plan is to get a big board of flyers and to protect all those flyers with counterspells. I feel like Azorius gets a pretty bad rep sometimes. I feel like a lot of people think of like stacks and, saying no fun allowed, but you can actually have a pretty punchy board and just have the right amount of interaction that a lot of other colors have normally. So I think that overall this is a great first Azorius deck.
Yeah, this deck is really solid. It is a $22 deck. We are talking like bare bones, the most simple precon that you can just pick up and play as a deck. This is one of the starter decks from a couple years ago, and I think they were all good in their own right, but this is like one of the cheapest precons you could possibly buy, and I do think it's a reasonable value both as, both as a functional deck and as a cool thing that you could upgrade over time. The total value of the cards today is $59. That's about reasonable. We're probably looking to at least double our money on that so that you're not spending $22 on $22 of cards. You know what I mean? Average mana value is 3.72. That's pretty standard for a precon. They do trend a little more highly. If you want to upgrade that, obviously you can lower it. There are some pretty sweet cards in this deck, even though it is super budget.
One of them is Diluvian Primordial. I mean, we love this in budget too. And this is a card that we put in because it puts in so much work. We also have Bite of Thassa in here, which is great because you're going to be getting very, very punchy. And Swords to Plowshares, one of the best white removal spells ever printed. I'm so happy to see it in here.
Yeah, it's pretty cool that you can take this deck out of the box and you have some really solid options. Some of the best options you could play in the best version of this Isperia deck that you can still just keep in, like Swords, and Bident probably goes in there too, and Diluvian Primordial is just sweet. There are some like weird cards in here. I mean, it is a precon, so like I think the worst card in the deck is probably Isperia's Supreme Judge. I don't understand why this is the commander. There's another commander in the deck, Kangi, that gives your flyers +2/+0 whenever it attacks, and it gives them +0/+2 whenever it blocks. That's great. That's perfect for this deck. Literally, every creature in this deck has flying. So I don't know why Isperia is the commander. When you buy this, switch those out, and you will have like a 30% increase in your win rate because it actually does something, and Isperia is pretty bad. There's also Banishing Light. It's not unplayable. It's just not a card I don't think you're going to get too much mileage out of.
We also have Vow of Duty in here. I think that this is just awful considering your biggest win con is going to be punching. Why would you give them a vigilant blocker just for you? Like, I feel like that's not great.
And even in the base deck, don't you want them to attack you with like stuff? I don't know, man. Get those cards out of there. Swap Kangi. This deck's going to be super useful though. And I think the other thing to consider is like, yeah, this deck isn't the most valuable deck in the world. The most valuable card in the deck is Sephara at $5.50. But this is $20. You don't have to do any legwork. You can just go spend $22, buy this precon, and have a blue-white Flyers deck that has a lot of solid options in it that can actually close games. I mean, I love this deck. I said literally every creature has flying. So whether you're a new player or someone just looking for something simple, maybe shake it up and have the ability to upgrade this over time, you can take solace in the fact that when you sit down, you're going to score free wins just because nobody can block your stuff.
I feel like Flyers, that's just the one thing in so many games. It's just like, do you have a flyer? No, okay, I guess like swing for 20.
Yeah, games boil down to like who has flyers versus who doesn't all the time.
Overall, this is a great deck, not just for beginners, but anyone who wants to pick up something that is fully playable out of the box, very punchy, and just overall has a lot of synergy. But Moxfield Online is the best place to not only build decks, but also check out decks that have already been made. They run a Wizards of the Coast profile where you can actually check out the original lists of all the decks that we're going to talk about today.
I did not expect that. Wow. I was bamboozled. I'm sure you were too. And I think that you could use that energy, that you got bamboozled and direct it towards using Moxfield and building all your decks there because it's really going to pay you off in the long run. But we have another commander deck to go over. We got 5 of these. Next one is Enduring Enchantments. The face commander here is a Nixia, Hand of Erebos. This is a weird commander. 2 white, green, black for a 4/4 menace. Other enchantment creatures you control have menace. And when it enters or attacks, exile up to 1 target non-aura enchantment card from your graveyard and create a token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 3/3 black zombie creature in addition to its other types. So we're playing Enchantress, but like with a twist.
This is really awesome. This is a synergistic deck. There are 43 enchantments in here, and you can make copies of them with Onyxia and also swing with them because they're 3/3s with menace. That is a lot of punches to throw around and a lot of effects. The price of this is $50, but the total value is $122.71. That's a lot of value.
That's a lot of extra value, especially when we just went over the blue-white price before and after. That's pretty sweet. The average mana value is 3.61, and there's a lot of good cards here. There's a lot of solid Enchantress staples that we're hoping to have in our decks, so you won't have to go buy these for the upgrade because they're already there. We have Sithis Harvest Hand. I mean, that's one of your favorite cards.
Oh, it's so good. It's annoying. It comes down turn 2, and this plays like a normal Enchantress deck, but you also have the option to punch. Sigil of the Empty Throne, not only do you want to punch with your enchantments, you also want to punch with gigantic creatures that you're just getting for free because you're playing enchantments. I mean, that's just value.
Yeah, and then when everybody kills your enchantments because they're so scary, Onyxia is like, cool, here it is again as a 3/3, and I'm just going to keep making 4/4s out of it. And then Ondu Spirit Dancer, really cool Precon exclusive card, brand new with this Precon, and when it came out anyway. That's a sweet one. I've loved Ondu Spirit Dancer.
But moving on to the worst cards, I feel like Cunning Rhetoric, it is in so many Precons, and I feel like every time I see it, it doesn't do as much as I want it to do.
Oh my, I have only ever seen this card be terrible. It doesn't, it is an enchantment, so it triggers enchantment things, but I think you can do so much better, especially with card draw. I mean, Enchantress has no trouble drawing cards, so you really don't need this. You don't need to draw other people's cards.
I feel like it's so fine. It never deters people from attacking. I'd highly recommend just cutting this from any deck, mostly. There's also Greater Tanuki. This is one of those other Precon cards where it's like, this is in every deck as long because it says enchantment on it or because you need to find a land, and I don't think you need either of these things with Greater Tanuki. I feel like you can get them in other ways.
Yeah, it's so close to being awesome with Onyxia because you channel it to get a land, and then Onyxia can get it back, but the problem is the thing you get back is worthless. If it was get another land when it comes back, we would really be talking, but it just doesn't do that. It's a vanilla creature in play. And then Love Song of Night and Day, I just think this card's kind of random. It is a saga, so it works with the other commander in the deck, but I don't think you need to go all in on sagas, and this one isn't particularly valuable. Unlike the most valuable card in this deck, which is Starfield of Nyx, this is a $20 card. You buy this deck for $50, and one single card inside of it is now $20. You can sell it, make half the cost of the deck back, or just keep it and build the deck around it.
Starfield of Nyx is so synergistic in here, but it's so good to have a valuable piece that is also synergistic because you can either sell it if you want, or you could keep it in and it'll help the deck play exactly as it should.
Miso loves Precons. That's why he's literally jumping in and out, ruining our white balance. Just absolute menace of a cat. It's really easy to focus with you here, Miso. I'm so glad. I'm really glad that you're here, buddy. So yeah, whether you want to buy this deck and sell the Starfield, make half your money back, or just keep it in and really go in on that graveyard, you have that option. There's just so many reasons we like this deck. I think this is a weird one. I love a Precon that takes a weird spin on a beloved archetype, in this case, Enchantress. So I really think that's cool. I think even when Onyxia isn't out, this is just a good Enchantress deck. And when she is out, you're like, wait, I can fill the graveyard with a couple of these cards and then make this again and have extra resilience on all my threats. It's really fun.
There's also a ton of removal and card draw in here. I feel like this is one of the best Precons to keep the deck churning. You know what I mean? Enchantress overall has a ton of card draw, so that's already a pre-built-in thing. But I feel like this has a good spread of creatures, removal, and Onyxia has recursion. This overall just kind of covers all of your bases.
Yeah, I think this deck can be really punchy, and Onyxia by herself is a very strong commander. I think This deck could use a little bit of help on the filling graveyard front if you want to put like a couple enchantments that mill, or maybe like a Satyr Wayfinder, those type of effects. This deck could use a little bit more of that so that when you play an Ichthia on turn 4 or 5, you get something every time and you don't have to wait for things to die. But the deck's very strong out of the box, very functional, and you can't be mad at a $20 card in a $50 deck.
I'm not. The next deck is Cabaret Cacophony. The face commander is Kit Kanto, Mayhem Diva. 1 red, white, green for a 3/3. When she enters, you create a 1/1 citizen. At the beginning of combat on each player's turn, you can tap 2 untapped creatures you control. When you do, target creature that player controls gets +2/+2 and trample until end of turn, and it's also goaded. I like this because tokens are such a staple in Naya, so this is a good intro to that. It has a little bit of goad, and you can pump all of these too, so you get big punchies. You get things that do not swing at you and swing at other people, and you can make things gigantic and with trample, whether that's your stuff or everyone else's stuff, because of this triggers on each player's combat.
This is more of a token deck than a goad deck, and it just sort of treats the goad part of Kit Kanto like gravy. And I feel like this deck just aged so beautifully, because I remember, like, when it came out, I was like, okay, there's a lot of Commander Precons this year, and I think people sort of forgot about it. But looking back on it, I'm like, this is one of the best values of a Precon. This is so sweet. This deck, first of all, has eight ways to pump your tokens in some mass way to help like overrun. And it also has 18 non-creature ways to make tokens, and with, 2 or 3 or 4 goad synergies mixed in. I feel like that level of synergy and consistency is like unheard of in Precons. I mean, 8 mass pump spells for this tokens deck, like, you're going to be able to close a ton of games just by going A plus B plus C is super awesome. And this deck's price, $45, but the total value of the cards is $120.
That is such a good value. The average event value is 3.46, pretty standard for a Precon, but there's some awesome cards in here. One of them being Beastmaster's Ascension. I'm so happy to see this in a token deck, because that makes it so big. Every token's going to swing for a ton, especially since you can give them trample with our commander.
Yeah, Kit Kanto is going to also trigger on your turn, so if you have one really big thing and you want to give a double strike or something, cool. Pump it up with the +2/+2 goad, and then jam in, and then Beastmaster's like, cool, +5/+5. And then obviously all of your little dudes are coming into play too. There's also really solid and really important for tokens decks that I think will increase your win percentage a lot, having them versus not having them, and they come in this Precon. March of the Multitudes and Call the Coppercoats. 2 ways at instant speed to just create an army with just 1 card, or in the case of March, to double your army if you already have a small one. Just can absolutely surprise people from out of nowhere and steal games.
Especially when people think that they're safe because they just did a board wipe on their turn. They're like, they're fine. They're like, no, actually, I think I'll rebuild faster than you.
Yeah, I think Call the Coppercoats is really annoying, because when you're all at parity and everybody's got like 5 or 6 creatures and they're all just standing there staring at each other, you end step, you strive it for each opponent, and then you're like, here's 18 more creatures, and they're like, yeah, we're dead, aren't we? And you're like, yes, you are, because I'm going to start triggering my Felidar Retreats and my Beastmaster's Ascensions. There's also Duelist Heritage, which we love in general, but it's so good in this deck because you are solving all the problems that Duelist Heritage might have. Is, oh, what if they don't want to attack? We are literally giving them trample and forcing them to attack every turn.
It's so good. I'm so happy that this is reprinted in Precon so much, because it's such a functional card, but it really shines in here. And Scoot Swarm's in here. That is one of the best token makers ever. You can have such a big board just by playing the game and making it to that sweet turn 7, or whenever you have that like 7th land.
This is a Precon, and we haven't even talked about that many cards, but how many cards are we talking about that are like must-answer threats, or threats that transcend the Precon meta and just are good in Commander and you just want in all of your tokens decks? I know this isn't a landfall deck, but as soon as you even in the Precon level, as soon as you make 2 Scoot Swarms, it's like, it's a must-kill threat. You basically just need a board wipe at that point. It's so good. There are some weird cards. Zerzoth Chaos Rider is garbage, and you need to build a deck around him or not play him at all. That's fine. False Floor isn't even that terrible. It's just so finicky, and if you need a board wipe, you just kind of want it to be universal.
Yeah, I feel like that. And Assemble the Legion is in here too. We notoriously don't really like this card because we hate waiting for stuff. Why would we want to wait for tokens when we can just explode the board with a ton of tokens with every other thing in here?
Yeah, like March of the Multitudes or Assemble the Legion. It's not even close.
The most valuable card in here, though, is Grand Crescendo at $16. This is a smash hit, both when this deck came out and just still today. This card is awesome.
This card does everything. I love this card so much more than Burrow's Charm, which is also in the deck. So the deck does have ways to protect against, destruction-based board wipes, but this is a card that is good on defense and good on offense, which is like literally all I'm asking for in a Magic card that makes tokens. Is so amazing. I just feel like maybe even out of all these decks today, this just feels the most like a real deck. If someone just played this deck against me and just started resolving cards and didn't say anything about it, I would just assume this is a deck that they built.
It's so easy to not only upgrade, but just play out of the box. Plus, the goad is there, but it's not taking up too much space. It actually feels synergistic and not just like someone tried to make a precon and cram multiple themes in the same one.
Right. There's like 3 or 4 goad cards, cut Zerzoth, but Duelist Heritage is also good in the deck. And it's not one of those things that, clutters the deck and you just go, why is there a goad deck in here? There isn't. They did it. Goad usually screws things up in terms of how playable the precons are, but not this time. It also just has lots of enchantments and artifacts that make tokens and have some kind of consistent benefit. So your deck's not just 7 creatures in play that can die to a board wipe. I've got 4 creatures, 2 enchantments that are spitting out more creatures, and an artifact equipment that's going to go on something. And then they're like, all right, wipe the board. And you're like, cool. I still have a bunch of stuff in play. It's very sticky, this deck.
You're going to need multiple farewells to take out this deck because there are so many ways to keep it safe. And you can buy all of these decks on Card Kingdom, where we're actually sourcing the prices from.
Yeah, Card Kingdom has a great selection of precons. Head over there because you're going to find some great deals like this one. And we're going to go to our next great deal. It's Riders of Rohan. I think one of the strongest precons to ever exist. The face commander is Eowyn, Shield Maiden. 2 blue, white, red for a 5/4 first strike. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if another human entered the battlefield under your control this turn, you get 2 2/2 red humans with trample and haste. Then if you control 6 or more humans, which is not hard after that first ability, you draw a card.
This is such a good deck. I have watched this deck being played by people who have been playing the game for 6 months or something, right out of the box, just sleeved up and played, and it is still a threat because this deck explodes into humans. Your commander makes humans on its own, helps you with card draw, and there are so many ways to make more humans or buff your humans that you already have. The deck has so many built in, not just in token ways, that it's just so easy to get that advantage with your commander.
Yep, the price of the deck right now is $60, which is a little bit on the more expensive end of the precons we're talking about today, but the total value of cards is 102, so that's not spectacular, but I think what you're really getting with this deck is a functional pile of cards that very much have one goal in mind, and that is human kindred. The average mana value, 3.31. That's pretty low for a precon, so you are a little bit getting under a lot of the other decks you might be playing against if you're doing out-of-the-box stuff, but even if you're not, you can bring this to a table knowing you're going to get to cast about as many spells as everybody else.
This is such a punchy deck. It goes so quickly. The humans are so real that your commander makes, and then being able to have them buffed by other things in the deck, it makes it go so fast. One of the best cards and new cards in here is Taunt from the Rampart. This card is awesome. We love it in Argo decks / punchy decks, and it's just so good. Making sure everything can't block and goading everyone else's stuff is very real in combat strategies.
It's basically like a fireball. If you total up the power of all creatures in play, they're all going to be sent at somebody very soon, and there's not too much of a way to stop it aside from a board wipe. So, and that also includes your creatures. Right now, the turn you play this, they're all unblockable. That just means you're going to kill people really easily with it.
Shared Animosity is one of those ways where I was talking about where you can just buff all of the humans that you have. Everything in here is going to be a human. There's so many synergy pieces, so they're just going to get gigantic with this enchantment.
Yeah, I mean, Eowyn is built, and this deck is built to very easily trigger that if you control 6 humans, draw a card thing. She makes 2 humans that have haste, and when you play Shared Animosity a turn before, and then you go Eowyn and then trigger it and get some dudes, the plan is have 6 humans. If you do that, Shared Animosity represents 36 damage across your attacking creatures as a buff.
I mean, she's also a human herself, so that she's already supplying you with 2. She's a human herself. Play 3 humans before turn 5, and she comes out, and you'll be able to draw a card.
It's really not hard.
It's so good. And Combat Celebrant. You want to get punchy with your humans. He's a punchy human that also gives you an extra combat. That's amazing.
And then Eowyn triggers at the beginning of combat. So if you play, Combat Celebrant, it has haste or whatever, you go get 2 2/2s, draw a card, attack with everything, exert, untap, get 2 2/2s, draw a card. Like, this is some silly damage. As early as turn 5, 6, 7, that we're throwing out with this precon, it's not like, ooh, we threw around 10 damage. That's pretty neat. It's like someone's dead. Someone's literally dead right now.
I've died to this.
Awesome.
Right out of the box, I've died to this. But we have to move on to the worst cards because there are a couple stinkers in here. One of them being Earthquake. I just think that if you're in Jeskai, you can do way better for board wipes and cheaper than Earthquake.
Yeah, and like we're the ones with the smallest dudes. We got a bunch of 2/2s and 1/1s. Why would I want to do that? I guess you could treat this like a weird burn spell where you only play it if someone's going to die to it. But if that's the case, please cut it.
Yeah, and you also don't have flying, so this doesn't help you.
No, it does not. Also, Grey Host Reinforcements and Selfless Squire, they're humans. They're just on the lower tier of humans. I don't think Selfless Squire is very aggressive, and I think this deck does want to pressure people and just beat down. The most valuable card, surprisingly, is 4th Eorlingus, which is $12. I don't think it's super essential for this deck, so you could flip it to make back some of that $60 price tag, or you just keep it because it is flavorful. This is the Lord of the Rings deck where every card is built and literally designed in the Lord of the Rings universe or reskinned into the universe. So I think there is some value for Lord of the Rings fans for this deck in that regard.
Overall, though, it's just a very punchy deck. It's easy to go human, 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 commander, more humans, flood the board. And there's also like cost reduction here, like Herald's Horde and that sort, that just make it so synergistic and make it so easy to just have the board be overtaken by your tokens.
Yeah, it's easy to push through damage. And I like this deck because I feel like it's a simple concept that doesn't muddy itself with other random nonsense like some precons fall into the trap of. So it's like humans. That's simple, but there's a ton of neat and interesting ways to play it and pilot this deck. And there's a bunch of little knobs you can turn that this isn't like a beginner deck. I think a beginner could pick up this deck and we've seen it and it's great. But I think seasoned players can get a lot out of this too. And they can really crank up those turns where they realize, I have the table dead on turn 7 if I can set this up right.
It's so good. And your commander will give you card draw and bodies, which is just what you need to keep the deck flowing. It has basically everything else.
All right, next up is a commander deck we've been pretty high on, and we're going to talk about why we think it's most worth buying. It's Death Toll. Face commander is Winter Cynical Opportunist. 2 black-green for a 2/5 Death Touch. That's a big butt, buddy. Whenever Winter attacks, mill 3 cards. Delirium, at the beginning of your end step, you may exile any number of cards from your graveyard with 4 or more card types among them. If you do, put a permanent card from among them onto the battlefield with a finality counter on it. This is a little confusing to parse, so I'm just going to say what it does. If you exile a land, an artifact creature, and an enchantment, those are going to be exiled from your graveyard. They have Delirium, even though it was only 3 cards. You can now put one of those into play with a finality counter from Winter.
I was looking at the deck's criticisms online because we really like this deck, and I feel like a lot of people do not agree with us. And I feel like because of Winter's kind of confusing wording that it's kind of hard to understand that sometimes. One of them being he doesn't have to attack. He does trigger regardless of whether you've milled those cards without him, and he doesn't need to be in the graveyard or anything like that. So long as you have something that is worth cheating out and he's on the field, if you just mill those on a previous turn, like turn 1 or something, you like Thought Scour those into the graveyard, you can exile all of those, and then if you milled like a Kozilek or something, bring him right out.
Yeah, and it's optional, so you don't have to exile your graveyard, but this is going to be a deck that is okay exiling its graveyard. Graveyard decks exist in many different flavors, and some of them want 50 creatures in the graveyard, and they want to play Living Death, or they want to sacrifice all their creatures and cast them one by one. This deck wants to put them in the graveyard so that it can exile the chaff that it doesn't care about and bring back some of the big ones. It's more of like a Reanimator deck that has a finality counter at the end. I think that's totally fine. And this deck, as we get into the numbers, I think is very favorable if you would like to purchase it on Card Kingdom, because it feels like cheating a little bit. The price is $30. It's one of the cheapest precons we're talking about today, and it's $95 in value of cards. And I think with an average mana value of 3.49, this is a sweet one. We have big boys that we're trying to reanimate with this deck, and we still had an average mana value of 3.49.
There are so many good cards in here. One of them being Reanimate, one of the best reanimating spells ever in Magic. And this is just sitting in this precon because you don't need to rely on Winter to get back your stuff. Another version of this is Whip of Erebos. Again, you don't need to have your commander out. Say he doesn't stick once or twice because people know your game plan. You can still reanimate stuff with Whip of Erebos, give your stuff lifelink, sustain, or reanimate and just get your best big boy back.
The other thing this deck has that I really like is ways to fill the graveyard. Not only is your commander a consistent way to fill the graveyard, whether or not you're trying to spam his final ability, but it also just ensures that when you have Reanimate and Whip of Erebos, so you don't have to do that thing that the Enignia deck sometimes has to do where you go, I hope my enchantments die. This deck is like, no, I already put them all in there for you, dude. Just play Winter, even the turn he comes out, then you activate his Delirium thing, and you just get a big boy right into play. Grist the Hunger Tide is one of those ways to fill the graveyard that also functions as a removal spell and maybe a win condition if he can survive like 2 turns.
I mean, he's also a planeswalker too, so he can help with that card type.
Well, it's also a creature. So just by exiling Grist, you can go creature and planeswalker, and then maybe even bring Grist back with a finality counter on it. A planeswalker with a finality counter on it, not that big of a deal.
I know that you love him, and he works so well in this deck, but we have to have some stinkers too. One of them being Obnixilis Reignited. This is the Precon planeswalker that I always think of. They cram this guy into everything, and if you want to have a planeswalker in here, I think you should just switch him out for Lily Dreadhorde because she's very cheap right now.
Yeah, planeswalkers are good for this deck because you want to contribute to Delirium, but it's a little awkward because you get them back on your end step, so you can't activate them. So I would want a planeswalker with a static, like you said, like Lily maybe, or something else. But yeah, Obnixilis is like fine as filler for getting Delirium, but eventually you should upgrade it. Whispersilk Cloak, I get that we're supposed to put this on Winter, I guess, to always mill 3, but he's a 2/5 with Death Touch. I think we're going to be okay sneaking him through.
I think people are pretty afraid of that because what are they going to do? They can either take 2, and it's not like you're going to kill with commander damage. It's not like you have any combat tricks in here. And people won't want to just throw their biggest or best thing in front of him, or even just a token sometimes.
It's honestly like the perfect power and toughness because 2/5 means they have to double block it. It's got a lot of toughness. But if it had 1 power, they could maybe double block it without too much downside. But now if they want to double block it with 2 power, they're going to lose both things. So it's just not really a blockable creature.
No, and there's Suspicious Bookcase. I know we want multiple types. Artifact creature. Suspicious Bookcase does that for very cheap, but it's also not that good. But there's some serious value in here too, as we talked about earlier. The most valuable card is Reanimate. It's $8.50 even after a Precon reprinting. That is amazing value.
That's great, and I'm glad this deck did not skimp on creatures to reanimate. I know the quality of the creatures isn't like the highest. You can always upgrade for 50 cents to $1 after you buy this deck, but Giant Ataphage, Hornet Queen, Noxious Gearhulk, Demolisher Spawn is an absolute unit. Even I think Vile Mutilator is another one. They have big things that you can mill early, reanimate, and get a pretty solid advantage in the early game, or if you play a Winter in the mid game, or maybe you reanimate and then also get something with Winter and your opponents are just screwed.
And we're not just saying this because there's Ishkana in here, which is one of his favorites.
Love Ishkana. Ishkana is absolutely one of my favorites. But I do love this deck has multiple ways to reanimate. It's not just all in on Winter like a lot of the other Duskmourn Precons were. I'm talking to you, Valgavoth. And then Winter's attack trigger just fuels it. I think having that in the command zone, the enabler plus the payoff, is just overlooked. I don't know why everybody's hating on this deck. It's sweet. It's $30.
And you're getting so much value out of it, both money and just card quality. And I think it's pretty easy to get that Delirium. Getting those 4 types in the graveyard and then exiling them to get the biggest, best thing back, I'd say it's pretty easy in here. I think it's balanced enough among all of the types.
Death Toll haters, wake up. And if you want to see more Precons, maybe a ranking of every Precon that came out this year, which Death Toll is certainly among those Precons, you can watch that video right here.